Hi, I'm Kat, and today I have a true crime case for you, a word in Romanian, and I will also be doing my makeup at the same time. But before we get started, no, I didn't copy anyone. Before you guys jump at me in the comments, I didn't copy anyone. One of you actually suggested that I should wear cat headband because it kind of goes with the name of the channel. So yeah, this is what I'm doing. I was not intending to copy anyone whatsoever. Okay, so the word in Romanian for today is bicicletă. 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 Well done, guys, you just said bicycle. This video was actually suggested by my YouTube subscriber, Psychedelic Squirrel. So, on the afternoon of Christmas Eve 1991, 23-year-old Dana Ireland left her parents' home in Puna for a bike ride, but she never returned. People passing by called 911 after finding her bicycle, a shoe, and clumps of hair, but there was no sign of the rider. Half an hour later, and 5 miles away, Dana was found in the bushes of a fishing trail, naked from the waist down and barely conscious. She sadly died at the hospital from blood loss and multiple traumatic injuries. Dana died in the first minutes of Christmas Day 1991. A decade later, 3 Hawaii Island men would be convicted for her murder. But the story doesn't end here. Largely due to advances in DNA technology, an exoneration turned the Dana Ireland murder into a cold case, rather than a solved one. Among some of the questions about how the investigation and prosecution were handled, there is also a more fundamental one. If the people who served time for Dana's murder didn't do it, then who did? And guys, I have to tell you that this is a really messed up case, very complicated and just confusing. So hopefully I can make it easy for you to follow along.
My name is Dana Marie Ireland and I was born and raised in Virginia. Friends and family see me as a vibrant and beautiful person, and I think I lived my life fully. But when I was 23 years old, on Christmas Eve 1991, on my way home from my friend's house, while riding my bike, something horrific happened that really scared me. And sadly, I never returned home.
On the afternoon of Christmas Eve 1991, Dana was struck by a vehicle while she was riding a bicycle down a red cinder road on the island of Hawaii. Dana was visiting the island from her home state of Virginia. She cycled around 8 miles from her parents' rental home in Kapoho vacation land to a friend's house to invite him over for Christmas Eve dinner. The friend was actually the last person to see Dana alive. At around 4:30 p.m. on 24th of December, a vehicle struck Dana Ireland as she rode her bicycle down Kapoho Kai Drive. At around 5 p.m., witnesses passing through Kapoho Kai Drive at the entrance to Kapoho Vacation Land stumbled upon the scene of an abandoned collision, finding tire tracks in the dirt, a white tennis shoe, a mangled black bike, and clumps of blonde hair. They searched the area for the bicycle's rider, thinking that someone was severely injured, but they actually couldn't find anyone. At 5:36 p.m., Sergeant Robert F. Wagner of the Hawaii County Police Department arrived at Kapoho Kai Drive and observed a black mountain bike on the right-hand shoulder with debris on the roadway. He later testified that he noticed what appeared to be a gouge mark in the roadway area and what appeared to be acceleration marks on the roadway area leading up to where the bicycle was at. He also found a shoe, a clump of blonde hair, and a wristwatch on the scene. Around the same time that the police were called to the scene with the bike at about 4:45 p.m., in Wawa, Ida Smith, a local resident, heard crying near her house. When she went to investigate the noise, she found Dana Ireland bloodied and her clothes were torn off, and she believed that she was the victim of a sexual assault. Since Ida had no access to a phone, she had to stop cars from a nearby street to call for help. At 6:20 p.m., Officer Harold Pino of the Hawaii County Police Department arrived at the scene. He observed several people trying to comfort Dana, who was incoherent and seriously injured. About half an hour later, Hawaii County Fire Department paramedic Johnson K. Kaili arrived at the scene and observed that Dana had numerous abrasions on her face, was suffering from shock, and had a very large laceration to the right side of her head, through which her skull was visible. He was unable to measure her blood pressure, which indicated that her blood pressure was very low. Later that night, the paramedic brought Dana Ireland into the Hilo Medical Center emergency room, where she was treated by Dr. Nigel Palmer. Emergency room nurse Reggie Elliam observed that Dana had lost a lot of blood and sustained a large laceration to her scalp and multiple contusions. Following emergency surgery, sadly, Dana Ireland passed away. She died at 12:07 a.m. on 25th of December 1991. Dr. Charles Reinhold, pathologist at the medical center, performed an autopsy of Dana Ireland and determined that she died from massive blood loss due to multiple traumatic injuries throughout her body. In the days following Dana's death, the police exclusively searched for two types of vehicles which were suspected to be involved in the accident based on eyewitnesses' accounts: a dark-colored 1970s model pickup truck and a light-colored van. The police also collected evidence from Dana and from the crime scenes, including Dana's underwear, a Jimmy Z brand t-shirt, and a child's shoe, all of which had Dana's blood on them. But despite their investigation and with multiple tips phoned to law enforcement, police couldn't find the suspects for this horrific crime, and for 3 years the case remained cold. Dana was actually visiting family on Hawaii Island when she was murdered, and her murder divided the community. The media was relentless in its coverage and the investigation intense. But with all of that, years went by with no suspects in custody and with no charges being brought. Even with the reward for information increased, there was no break in the case. Until May 1994, when John Gonzalez reached out to Hawaii County Police. John was involved in a large cocaine ring, facing decades in prison. But after his conversation with investigators, the drug case was closed and John only got probation. It turns out that he actually made a deal with the investigators. He told police that his half-brother, Frank Pauline, had some really important information about Dana's case. So naturally, investigators, they set about talking to this Frank guy, right? And he had some fingers to point, okay? He said that brothers Albert Ian and Sean Schweitzer were Dana's killers. The Schweitzers lived in the same neighborhood as the Pauline family, and the neighbors didn't really get along. Frank Pauline claimed that he was there when the Schweitzers attacked Dana Ireland. On June 18, 1994, Detective Steve Guillermo of the Hawaii County Police Department met with Frank Pauline at the Attorney General's office on the island of Oahu. After being advised of his constitutional rights, he relayed what happened on December 24th, 1991. Frank said that Ian and Sean Schweitzer stopped by his house during the early afternoon hours and asked him if he wanted to go out and party. Frank understood that to mean if he wanted to go and join them to have some cocaine and probably go cruising. He agreed, and he got into Ian's purple Volkswagen with Ian driving and Sean in the front passenger seat. They headed towards Pohoiki and made several stops to smoke cocaine. As they neared Kapoho, they spotted Dana Ireland standing on the roadside. At that time, Ian made some comment to her which is similar to the word ho, or something like that. He immediately turned around and headed back in the direction towards Dana. The car was traveling at about 40 miles per hour when it struck her. After driving over her, Ian reversed over her again and then stopped the car. The Schweitzer brothers got out, they picked her up and loaded her into the car's front trunk. They next drove towards the Wawa area on Beach Road. They stopped once along the way to smoke crack, and Ian also checked the car's trunk. When they reached the Wawa area, they stopped the car on a dirt roadway. Frank then helped Ian remove Dana from the trunk compartment. They placed her on the ground and Ian had sexual intercourse with her. Frank Pauline later stated that he helped Ian in pulling Dana's pants down. Ian then invited him to also have sex with her, but he refused. Ian told Frank that they have to kill her or else she would be able to identify them. In response, Frank walked back to the car and retrieved a tire iron from the back portion of the car. At that point, he approached Dana, looked at her and swung the tire iron at her head. He hit her, but he wasn't sure exactly where. Frank Pauline later signed a formal statement admitted in evidence which stated that his intention in hitting Dana Ireland with the tire iron was to make sure that he killed her. He also noted that Ian may have later struck Dana. When they left the scene, he didn't realize that they left Dana behind until they arrived at the Schweitzer's home and were washing the car. Which honestly to me seems completely unbelievable. You just killed someone and you don't realize that, the body is not in your car? I don't know. Now, you need to keep in mind that Frank Pauline was already in prison at the time, serving 10 years for an unrelated sex assault and theft. Frank Pauline implicated himself in Dana's murder, rape and kidnapping, as well as the two brothers, Sean and Ian Schweitzer. Sean, the youngest of the group, was only 16 years old at the time of the crime. Police initially didn't believe Frank's account. His stories were really inconsistent with the details of the crime. During his first admission, Frank didn't know that the suspect had attacked Dana while she was riding her bike. Also, the Pauline family had long-standing bad blood against the Schweitzer family, who had filed numerous complaints against the Paulines. Frank even admitted that he wasn't close friends with the Schweitzers. However, Frank's half-brother, John Gonzalez, who was facing serious drug charges at the time, also told police that Frank Pauline had confessed to him about committing the crime with the Schweitzer brothers. But similar inconsistencies were found in the half-brothers' accounts. Initially, the half-brother claimed that the three of them committed the crimes in Ian's ex-girlfriend's pickup truck, but later he changed his story to say that they committed the crime using Ian's Volkswagen Beetle. But even with all of these inconsistencies, the half-brother received a plea agreement for his drug charges as long as he cooperated with authorities to help investigate Dana's murder. In return for telling the police the identities of the alleged suspects of Dana's murder, Frank Pauline also began to receive immediate prison benefits, including additional phone calls to his girlfriend, promises of special visitations and preferred prison housing. After Frank Pauline's and the half-brothers' confessions, multiple informants came forward with information alleging that the Schweitzer brothers and Frank Pauline had kidnapped, raped and murdered Dana. Each of these informants received lesser sentences in exchange for their testimonies. In July 1996, just over 2 years after John Gonzalez first spoke to police, remember John, the one who was involved in the cocaine ring? Well, after he spoke to the police, Frank Pauline recanted his story that the Schweitzer brothers killed Dana, saying that he made it all up because his half-brother asked him to make a deal so that they could both get out of prison. He told police, quote, "I can make up one story, I can bullshit. These guys are going to believe me. All I care about is saving my brother's ass. And my brother telling me the worst thing that can happen to you is they are going to give you perjury." End of quote. But on July 30th, 1997, Frank Pauline was indicted, but he wasn't actually indicted for perjury. His statements backfired and he was charged with rape, kidnapping and murder. As a result of the informant's statements, a grand jury indicted the Schweitzer brothers on October the 10th, 1997 for Dana's murder, rape and kidnapping. John Gonzalez, you remember the cocaine ring thing, stuck to the story that had gotten the major conspiracy charges against him dropped. He testified in court against his half-brother Frank Pauline.
From NBC Hawaii News 8.
Topping our news tonight, another setback in the Dana Ireland murder case.
Dana Ireland was 23 years old in 1991. She was riding a bike the afternoon of Christmas Eve in Kapoho when she was struck by a vehicle. The mangled bike was at the scene along with a shoe and clumps of blonde hair, but 911 callers could not find a rider. 30 minutes later, 5 miles away, Ireland was found in the bushes of a fishing trail. She was nude from the waist down, barely conscious. She would die at the hospital from blood loss due to multiple traumatic injuries. Years went by with dogged media coverage. The reward grew as residents demanded answers.
When something horrible happens in a community, people want justice. They want someone to be accountable.
2.5 years after the crime, police got what they thought was a big break. A tip. The source was questionable, a prisoner who offered information that would lead to arrests.
Hawaii County Police were contacted by John Gonzalez. Gonzalez was wrapped up in a large cocaine conspiracy, facing decades in prison. Instead, the drug case was closed, and Gonzalez only got probation. That's because he told police that his half-brother, Frank Pauline, had important information about the Ireland case. Pauline named brothers Albert Ian and Sean Schweitzer as the killers. The Schweitzers lived across the street, and the neighbors didn't get along. Pauline said he was there when the Schweitzers attacked Ireland.
They started having sex with a girl, started biting her and stuff like that, and just everything else happened after that.
Pauline was already in prison, serving 10 years for an unrelated sex assault and theft. But in July 1996, Pauline recanted, saying he made it all up because Gonzalez asked him to make a deal so they could both get out of prison.
Well, I can make up one story. I can these guys won't believe me. All I care about is saving my brother's ass. And he telling me, my brother telling me the worst can happen to you, boy, is gonna give you perjury.
But perjury was not one of the crimes Pauline was indicted for on July 30th, 1997. His statements backfired, and he was charged with rape, kidnapping, and murder. John Gonzalez stuck to the script that got the drug conspiracy charges against him dropped and testified against his half-brother, Frank Pauline.
In the 90s, DNA technology was quite new to the crime-solving process, so shortly after the arrests were made, authorities collected DNA samples from Frank Pauline and the Schweitzer brothers. The Hawaii County Prosecutor's Office also tested bodily fluids from the gurney sheet used when Dana Ireland was transported to the hospital and swabs from the rape kit. To the investigators' surprise, all of the samples excluded Frank Pauline and the Schweitzer brothers. Bite marks found on Dana also didn't match the dental impressions of Frank Pauline or the Schweitzer brothers. So they didn't do it and they lied about it. Then all the charges against them were dismissed. But that didn't stop the prosecution from continuing to pursue them.
Hawaii County Prosecutor's Office tested bodily fluids from the gurney sheet that was used when Dana Ireland was transported to the hospital. Also tested swabs from Ireland's rape kit. It was a surprise to law enforcement that both samples excluded Frank Pauline and the Schweitzer brothers. Law enforcement simply said there must have been another person involved.
Rather than look at the evidence and say, you know what, we got it wrong. It doesn't match these three people. There had to be a fourth person.
Other pieces of evidence also pointed away from the three men. Dental impressions did not match what investigators believed was a bite mark on the victim's chest. And it was revealed police found no traces of blood or hair from Dana Ireland in the Volkswagen Beetle belonging to Albert Ian Schweitzer.
Following this dismissal, the prosecution obtained statements from a jailhouse informant who claimed that Ian Schweitzer confessed to the crime. Despite the lack of forensic evidence linking them to the crimes, a grand jury re-indicted the Schweitzer brothers for Dana's rape and murder in 1999. Law enforcement said there must have been another person involved, even though other pieces of evidence also pointed away from the three men. The dental impressions didn't match what investigators believed was a bite mark on the victim's chest. Police found no traces of Dana's blood or hair in Albert Ian Schweitzer's Volkswagen Beetle, a car that he actually didn't own until a month after Dana Ireland was murdered. But prosecutors kept going forward. On May the 5th, 1999, with the statute of limitations days away for some of the crimes, police got what they believed to be another break in the case. An inmate named Michael Ortiz came forward. He was an associate of John Gonzalez and he was also in jail for theft with the Schweitzers before the charges against them were dismissed. In interviews with authorities, Michael Ortiz claimed that Schweitzer confessed to him.
Your full and correct name?
Michael Wayne Ortiz.
Inmate Michael Ortiz, another associate of Gonzalez, came forward.
Questions about the Dana Ireland case, and you provided us with information. Who gave you that information?
Ian Schweitzer.
And just 2 weeks later, Frank Pauline and the Schweitzers were indicted yet again. The brothers denied any involvement in the attack, saying that they were with family on Christmas Eve 1991. Now, can you see where this is going? All these people coming forward, saying that they did it. They are, in my opinion, saying this to get deals. They know each other, so they know that the other one is getting a deal, so they know that they can get a deal as well. The first of the men to go to trial for Dana Ireland's murder was Frank Pauline. The horrible details of Dana Ireland's injuries were laid out for the jury. Dr. Kanti von Günther, forensic pathologist and first deputy medical examiner for the city and county of Honolulu, reviewed the medical records, including autopsy photographs, Dr. Reinhold's autopsy report, and X-ray reports. Dr. von Günther observed that Dana Ireland had numerous injuries, including damage to her brain and to the outer part of her head, extensive bleeding of her head, scrapes to her back, her legs and arms, bruising of her lips, tears with bleeding in her mouth, a bite mark to her left breast, fingernail scratch marks to her right breast, fingernail scratch marks on her left hip, extensive bruising to her neck, vagina and scalp, and a broken pelvis and clavicle. One of the witnesses, Ida Smith, said that she got hold of Dana's arm and told her she will help her get up, and that's when Dana started screaming in pain. But the witnesses who actually linked Frank Pauline to the crime had questionable backgrounds, as you can tell by now, and some of them actually had a lot to gain by pointing the finger. Among them was, of course, John Gonzalez, the drug dealer who got out of prison for coming forward. Another witness, William Chung, claimed that Frank Pauline confessed to him, but when he was asked to point Frank out in the courtroom, he couldn't even identify him. The jury was also shown Dana Ireland's bike, shorts, top, underwear, and the Jimmy Z t-shirt that was recovered from the scene.
Louise Ireland entered the Hilo courthouse, ready to relive the worst day of her life, the day her daughter Dana was violently taken from her.
Something awful has happened. She said, there's a bicycle up in the road and a shoe and a hat.
So I got hold of her arm, and I said, let me help you up. And she started to scream. Pain.
But the witnesses who actually linked Pauline to the crime had questionable backgrounds or much to gain by pointing the finger. Among them, Gonzalez, the drug dealer, who got out of prison for coming forward. Shane Kobayashi, who was also released from prison early after a sex assault conviction.
Sir, you have a deal, an agreement with the government in this case, is that correct?
Yes, I do.
William Chung, who claimed Pauline confessed to him, but when asked, couldn't even identify Pauline in the courtroom.
And where is he sitting?
He's sitting in the corner with the blue shirt. He has the grayish hair with the white long sleeve shirt.
The record will not reflect that the witnesses identified the defendant.
The jury was shown Dana Ireland's bike, shorts, top, underwear, and a Jimmy Z t-shirt, all recovered from the scene.
None of those items had DNA from Frank Pauline or the Schweitzer brothers. The sperm on her clothing and the rape kit swabs came back to an unknown male. Frank Pauline's defense attorney told the jury that more than a dozen people were tested and not one was matched. But to get around the lack of scientific evidence, Deputy Prosecutor Lincoln Ashida insisted that the Jimmy Z t-shirt that was covered in Dana Ireland's blood belonged to Frank Pauline. Frank Pauline's attorney said that the shirt wasn't even the right size. In the end, the jury found that there was enough evidence to convict Frank Pauline. Albert Ian Schweitzer's trial was next. Having seen what happened during Frank's trial, the guilty verdict, Albert was really surprised when prosecutors, despite having won, presented him with an offer. They gave him 20 years of probation, but Ian or Albert refused. He knew he had nothing to do with Dana's murder. Frank was already convicted. He was confident that he will win. The prosecution insisted that Ian's Volkswagen Beetle was the car that struck Dana on her bike, then drove her injured body to the fishing trail where she was found, even though witnesses described seeing a pickup truck in the area and not the Volkswagen Beetle. The prosecution also used evidence which was already presented in Frank's trial.
They offered me 20 years probation. I said no. I had nothing to do with this. Pauline is already convicted. They offered me 10 that same week. At the end of the week, these guys are offering me 10 years probation for something I didn't do. I'm going in there like I'm going to win.
The prosecution insisted that his VW Beetle was the car that struck Ireland on her bike, then drove her badly injured body to the fishing trail where she was found, even though witnesses described seeing a pickup truck. These are the vehicles police were looking at before the tip from prisoners led them to the Schweitzers.
However, with all of these errors from the prosecution, Ian Schweitzer was convicted. After the verdict was read, Dana Ireland's father approached Ian's father in court. Jerry Schweitzer believed that Dana's father probably didn't believe it was a fair trial because after he had finished, he told Jerry that he was sorry. John Ireland, Dana's father, later told reporters that he told Jerry he had his sympathy. He knew that the family will be ostracized. After his brother Ian was convicted, Sean Schweitzer was in line to be tried. But after seeing what happened at the first two trials, he and his family had a change of heart, worrying that the justice system would fail them yet again. Sean Schweitzer ended up pleading guilty to the lesser charges, kidnapping and manslaughter, just to avoid the trial. He didn't want to plead guilty, but he actually had no choice. Part of the deal with prosecutors was that Sean Schweitzer had to blame his brother and Frank Pauline for Dana's murder and to take a lie detector test to show that he was being honest while admitting to and providing details of the crime. On 24th of March 2000, a polygraph examiner from the State Attorney's General Office administered the test. The report, according to court documents, shows that Schweitzer did in fact display criteria indicative of deception when describing details of what happened. Ken Lawson, the Hawaii Innocence Project co-director, told Hawaii News Now, quote, "When Sean tried to discuss his involvement, it showed that he was being deceptive, i.e. he was lying about being involved," end of quote. That could have disqualified him from pleading guilty, but it didn't. According to the polygraph report, it turns out that he was routed to the prosecutor's office on April the 6th, 2000. But weeks later in court, Deputy Prosecutor Lincoln Ashida relayed a different message to the judge. According to court transcripts, the prosecutor said that Sean Schweitzer did pass the polygraph, finding that he was not deceptive to any of the questions. He told the judge that, fully knowing that Sean never actually passed the polygraph. Once you take the polygraph card out and the DNA doesn't match anyone, there is no case. Sean Schweitzer later admitted that he was lying about everything, that he had nothing to do with the violent attack on Dana, Ireland, but that he took the deal to avoid more time behind bars. According to him, it was a family decision. His parents wouldn't have stayed together. There wouldn't be any point for two brothers to be in prison. He would have probably killed his mom, his dad, and just imagine the financial stress of it all. His brother Ian told him to take the deal. So Sean Schweitzer was sentenced to 5 years probation with credit for time served 18 months. He still has immense guilt about making the deal and implicating his brother. They also struggled with the stain of the case. He struggled to find a job. Community members would always make comments about the case. Even years later, his kids struggled in school with people talking behind their backs. In 2005, Albert Ian Schweitzer applied for a case review from the Innocence Project. Based in New York, the Hawaii Innocence Project was in its infancy at the time. 5 years later, in 2010, University of Hawaii law students worked with attorneys, professors and staff sifting through old records and the Hawaii County prosecutors didn't really stand in the way. They allowed the Innocence Project to review the case to determine if the wrong men were convicted. A hearing on the matter was set for the next day. Hours after the motion was filed, state deputy sheriffs pulled Schweitzer from Arizona's Saguaro Correctional Center and escorted him on multiple flights to get to Hilo in time for the hearing. He didn't know what was going on, but he knew that he was heading home. After a long night in the hotel, his family gathered early next morning at the Hilo courthouse. They were anxious to see Albert Ian Schweitzer, who had only arrived on the island hours earlier.
I think he really believed that there was a fair trial, because after the trial he told me he was sorry.
He told his father that he had my sympathy. I think the parents are going to be ostracized, and they've got a heck of a lot to go through.
He was right. The Schweitzer family was ostracized for many years.
Bumper stickers, posters, people calling up and threatening us. We thought, well, maybe we ought to just get out of Hawaii and stuff. And after talking with, Sean and the rest of the family, it said, looked like we just trying to run away from something we didn't do.
Court shows Schweitzer did, in fact, display criteria indicative of deception when describing details of what happened.
That when Sean tried to discuss his involvement, it showed that he was being deceptive, i.e. he's lying about being involved.
Through many years of disappointment and hard time to find a job, not have people look at me or make snickering remarks behind my back, When my children were in elementary and intermediate, they always had other people talk behind their back.
He said it was a relief when he learned that another set of legal eyes were looking over his brother's case. Loved ones were gathering with his legal team at the Hilo Hawaiian Hotel for a restless night.
It's been extremely difficult.
Gotta wait for the final results, because we've been up and down for so long, and just gotta wait for that last moment.
Linda and Jerry Schweitzer recall the prison visits with their son over the years, but once he moved to Saguaro, visits dropped off. The long flight, the long drive, and Linda was battling breast cancer at the time.
We only got to see him once, and, health issues, I couldn't get over there.
That one time in the Arizona prison, her son said something to her that still stings.
He said, "Mom, don't come back, because I don't want to watch you walk away from me again." It was hard. Sorry. but it was hard.
Schweitzer was 26 years old when he was arrested. His son was just an infant. He's now 51 years old. In those years, he missed his brother's wedding and other life-changing family events.
Jeez, I haven't seen him in, 20, 22 years. And just him not being there in our family. He's an uncle. He is missed. You know how sometimes you need that person that needs that extra something for that person, other person's life. It's you don't get that back. Yeah, been very missed in my life and my children and grandchildren.
Attorney Susan Friedman of the New York Innocence Project went through each piece of evidence that multiple labs tested in recent years traces of sperm, the stick and comb from Dana Ireland's rape kit. There was also DNA recovered from the Jimmy Z t-shirt, which the prosecution insisted belonged to Frank Pauline. All the items were tested again using advanced methods not available during the original trials. In 2000, law enforcement said the t-shirt had too much of Dana's blood to test for any other DNA contributors, but scientists reviewing the evidence for the Innocence Project were able to separate her blood from other DNA found on the shirt. Sperm and sweat from the armpit were also recovered. The source of the sperm was unknown male number 1. The same male DNA was found on the armpit and cutting. According to the new analysis, unknown male number 1 was the only male contributor of all the DNA evidence at the scene and on Dana Ireland's body. Following this testimony, an expert in tire tread evidence testified remotely, telling the court that Schweitzer's beetle could not have realistically made the impressions left behind at both crime scenes. He believed it was a larger vehicle, a truck, SUV, or a van. Just what the police were originally looking for. Dentist Adam Freeman was the last to take the stand. Dana Ireland had an injury on her left breast that prosecutors originally said was a human bite mark. But the dentist said that this wasn't actually a bite mark. The circuit court judge, Peter Kubota, ruled, quote, "The new DNA evidence, the tire tread evidence, the bite mark evidence, and Sean Schweitzer's recantation conclusively proves that in a new trial, a jury would likely reach a different verdict of acquittal. So therefore, the conviction of Albert Ian Schweitzer for murder in the second degree, kidnapping and sex assault in the first degree is hereby vacated, and Mr. Schweitzer shall be released immediately from custody." End of quote.
The family gathered early the next morning at the courthouse, anxious to see Schweitzer, who only arrived in Hilo hours earlier. Dressed in an aloha shirt provided by his legal team, Schweitzer smiled and greeted the attorneys when he was brought into the courtroom, his hands still cuffed with a belly chain. The new evidence was presented to the court in categories. First up, a DNA expert.
My name's Nancy Din.
Attorney Susan Friedman of the New York Innocence Project carefully went through each piece of evidence that multiple labs tested in recent years. Traces of sperm from the cotton swab, the stick, and the comb from Dana Ireland's rape kit. The sperm on Ireland's underwear and on the gurney sheet used to transport her to the hospital. Also, DNA recovered from the Jimmy Z t-shirt, the one the prosecution insisted belonged to Frank Pauline. All the items were tested again using advanced methods not available during the original trial.
The technology, it got better, it got improved in the sense that we can now see things that we couldn't see before.
Previously, law enforcement said the shirt had too much of Dana Ireland's blood to test for any other DNA contributors. But scientists are now able to separate her blood from other DNA on the shirt. Sperm and sweat from the armpit were recovered.
Who is the source of the sperm found on the Jimmy Z t-shirt? The source of the sperm is unknown male number 1. And is that the same source of the male DNA found on the armpit cutting? Yes.
Unknown male number 1 was the only male contributor of all the DNA evidence at the scene and on Ireland's body.
you if you could state your name for the record.
The next person called to the stand, an expert in tire tread evidence. He testified remotely, telling the court that Schweitzer's beetle could not have realistically made the impressions left behind at both crime scenes. Rather, he believed it was a larger vehicle, a truck, SUV, or a van, like the ones police initially looked at.
Stand and raise your right hand.
Dentist Adam Freeman was the last to take the stand. Ireland had an injury on her left breast that prosecutors originally said was a human bite mark. This is a picture of the wound that Freeman studied.
And in your review of this pattern injury, can you please describe what you determined this pattern injury to be?
Not a bite mark. I don't know what caused that. This particular case is a poster child for bad forensic sciences and where bite marks are flawed.
We rest. The new DNA evidence, the tire tread evidence, the bite mark evidence, and Sean Schweitzer's recantation conclusively proves that in a new trial, a jury would likely reach a different verdict of acquittal. So therefore, the conviction of Albert Ian Schweitzer for murder in the second degree, kidnapping, and sexual assault in the first degree is hereby vacated, and Mr. Schweitzer shall be released immediately from custody in this courtroom.
23 years after a jury found him guilty, 25 years after he was arrested, 51-year-old Albert Ian Schweitzer was suddenly a free man.
You got 1/3 of your life ahead of you. You can live it being angry and resentful at the process or the people that put you there, or you can live it with a new freedom. All right, I suggest that since you have your whole family here, you hug and love your family and live a fulfilled life and make the best of the next 1/3 of your life. Mr. Schweitzer shall be released from his shackles immediately.
After the cuffs were off, Schweitzer embraced his legal team. Then, family members, some he hadn't seen in decades. His mother sobbed in his arms. So did his sister. His son, who was just a baby when Schweitzer went to prison, was also in the courtroom.
Finally get to see Dad.
And has kept the door open for a relationship. Also waiting with a smile and open arms, brother Sean.
23 years after a jury found him guilty and 25 years after he was arrested, Albert Ian Schweitzer was suddenly a free man. In addition to throwing out the conviction, the judge also dismissed the indictment. That means that Schweitzer has no criminal case pending. Following the exoneration, Sean Schweitzer's attorney is also now working to get his conviction vacated as well. Frank Pauline's attorney has already filed for a dismissal posthumously. Frank Pauline died in prison in 2015. He was killed in a New Mexico prison by another inmate. The unknown male number 1, the source of all the male DNA at the scene, this evidence has been uploaded into a national database, but so far there is no hit. But Barry's check of the New York Innocence Project isn't giving up hope. He said, quote, "I'm always amazed at the number of cases where we have exonerated people, and then 10, 15, 20 years later we find the person who did it," end of quote. Hawaii County Prosecuting Attorney Keldon Woljan released this statement on the case. Quote, "Over the last 3 years, his office has shared information and re-examined forensic evidence." He added, "We remain committed to identifying unknown male number 1 and seeking justice for Dana Ireland and her Ohana." End of quote. Dana Ireland's parents have sadly passed away. Her sister lives on the East Coast. Meanwhile, the court dismissed the case without prejudice so the state can try again. Ashida, the former prosecuting attorney in the Dana Ireland case, said in a statement that another trial, prosecution and conviction is possible against Schweitzer based on other admissible and incriminating evidence. He said because of that, he couldn't comment on the case. I mean, in my opinion, it's quite obvious what happened here. The prosecutor was obsessed with getting a win, with just getting a conviction that for him it didn't really matter that the wrong people were being convicted. If the evidence didn't incriminate them, he would hide it or just ignore it completely. He would just use the information to suit his story and not the truth. The same, I believe, goes for the investigators. They went with a theory from the beginning and they made the evidence match their theory rather than following the evidence and allowing that evidence to reveal what happened. As for Ian Schweitzer, going from prisoner to free person has been quite a tough transition. He's working to reconnect with loved ones and the world, really. Everything is changed now. He doesn't know how to use a phone. He has to get a driver's license. He had to learn how to do everything again. When he was arrested, he was a nurse at the Samuel Mahelona Memorial Hospital on Kauai. He would be close to retirement now if he hadn't been imprisoned. When he was released on 24th of January, he had no money, no job training or mental health treatment, and adjusting to life outside prison has been more of a challenge than he anticipated. He feels anxious most days and cleaning helps to calm him down. He tries getting into a daily routine. He's been told for so long what to do that it's hard for him to make decisions on his own. He could be eligible for compensation for his wrongful imprisonment under a law passed in 2015 that allows exonerees to collect $50,000 for every year spent in prison. His legal team is working to get him compensated. In the meantime, he tries to educate others about wrongful convictions, speaking to law students and public groups on behalf of the Hawaii Innocence Project, which represented him for free. His story now draws a crowd and he hopes that at least future lawyers are listening. He wants them to know not just textbook, but what the system is really about. Legal experts say that a wrongful conviction creates many new victims to a crime. A justice system blinded by political pressure failed Albert Ian Schweitzer and his family and stole decades of their life. It failed Dana Ireland and her family, and it allowed unknown male number one to get away with murder. Today, in the wake of Albert Ian Schweitzer's exoneration, law enforcement reopened Dana's murder case using genealogy and DNA techniques in a new attempt to find the man who killed Dana Ireland on Christmas Eve 1991. On the outside, Louis and John Ireland, Dana's parents, were residents of Springfield, a Virginia suburb about 11 miles southwest of Washington, D.C. They were just your normal couple. They used to shop at the mall, take walks down the street, pick up the mail from the floor. Their house looked no different than the rest of the neighborhood. But once you look inside, you can see a clear difference. No fewer than 18 photos of Dana at various stages of her 23 years of life sit on shelves and tables in the living dining area. In the family room, there are football trophies. In the bedroom, you can see the stuffed animals, furniture, a 1991 calendar, and Dana's other belongings, always a reminder of what happened to their daughter. From the moment that she died on Christmas Day 1991, Dana Ireland was buried in legal documents, autopsy reports, police radio transcripts, depositions, confessions, and withdrawals. But Dana was much more than the media made her out to be. She loved hiking the Virginia hills. She was a vibrant young woman, strong and joyful to be outdoors. Dana's family and friends in Virginia and in Hawaii keep her humanity alive through their memories. They say she was beautiful, shy, kind, and loyal. She was an athlete, a sweet daughter, a tomboy, an angel, an innocent, an average girl. Louise fell pregnant with Dana when she was 43 years old. She was already a mother to her 13-year-old daughter and she couldn't believe that she was pregnant. She was feeling bloated, she missed a period, but her doctor told her that at her age is highly unlikely to have more children. Even her neighbor told her she was pregnant, but Louise said that's just impossible. Her husband John came home from work one day and Louise was just sitting in the kitchen with a drink, which he found very unusual. He knew that she went to the doctor that day, so John really believed it was something serious, so he asked her what the doctor had said. She started crying, telling him that she was pregnant. John said, quote, "I grabbed the bottle and took a big slug, and then I looked at her and said, well, who the hell is going to cut the grass this summer?" End of quote. His wife would usually be the one to mow the lawn. Louise was actually a bit embarrassed about her pregnancy. She was of a generation that is a bit more discreet about these kind of things. But when Dana Marie was born on December 12th, 1968, Louise was ecstatic. Dana was her pride and joy, the best thing that ever happened to her in her life. Dana grew up in the neighborhood in Springfield. The family have lived in the 3-bedroom home for more than 37 years. Dana attended King Mill Elementary, Washington Irving Middle School, West Springfield High, Radford University, about 250 miles away, and George Mason University, about 8 miles away. Louise was a stay-at-home mom who always made sure she was there when Dana got back from school. When Dana was around 3 years old, she asked her dad John what her middle initial M stood for. He told her Magoo, and soon the neighborhood kids picked up the nickname. She didn't pay that much attention to the nickname until she saw a cartoon with Mr. Magoo in it, and that's when she said that she just didn't want that name. But Magoo kind of stuck. Her dad John said that Dana was loyal as well. When the coach of the high school soccer team tried to recruit her, she refused because he wouldn't give her teammates a tryout. She was very particular about her friends. They were all very nice people. Sometimes there would be parent-child differences, but nothing big really. She liked rock music and John couldn't really stand it. John wanted to give her an allowance, but she didn't really want one. Mostly, however, Dana earned her own spending money, managing swimming pools and working as a lifeguard and at a spa. She didn't really watch a lot of TV except for stuff about Hawaii, water skiing, surfing and other water sports. She didn't read a lot except for National Geographic magazine, which fed her curiosity about the larger world. She couldn't sit still. She would run, do exercises, skate, then go home and start all over again. She was a tomboy, but a neat one. Her jeans, shorts and shirts had to fit right, and she had to have the right kind of shoes. She barely wore any dresses and she didn't wear makeup because she wanted to look more natural. Staying fit was important to her and she was very particular about her diet. She didn't smoke. She drank once when she was at Radford University and it made her so sick that she never drank again. She never touched drugs either. Dana admired her sister Sandy. She always kept her hair long because Sandy had long hair. Their age gap meant that they spent only 5 years in the same house before Sandra left for college. Sandy got on the plane to school in Florida the same day that Dana entered kindergarten, but they were still very close. It was Sandy who actually named her Dana. Their mom liked Marie, but Sandy liked Dana. They also looked very much alike. When Sandra moved to Hawaii, the family visited her almost every year. Through Sandra, Dana grew to love the ocean and the outdoor island lifestyle. After Dana finished college, she went to stay with Sandra and her boyfriend Jim Ingham in Vacation Land, a beach community. Sandra and Jim eventually got married. The last day the family spent together was in fact Christmas Eve 1991. They went on a shopping expedition to Hilo to buy gifts. Dana was driving and out of nowhere she told Louise, her mom, quote, "Mama, if there is no heaven when you die, that means the good and the bad go to the same place." End of quote. Louise didn't get Dana any gifts that year. They were going to Kona the next day and Dana said that she wanted to get a few things from there. For her mom, Dana had bought a shirt, a tray with a Hawaiian design and a handbag with sequins all over. John's gift to Dana was $400 in traveler's checks to be used on a trip with Sandra to Australia. He never got the chance to give them to her and to redeem them. Valerie Oliver knew Dana for most of her life. Mark Evans met Dana about 3 months before she died. She had a profound effect on both of their lives. When Valerie and Dana were in the 6th grade, Valerie's family moved in across the street from the Irelands. The two girls attended the same schools, their friendship deepening as they grew older. Like Dana, Valerie is blonde, slim, and athletic. Valerie lives with her husband, Richard Dexter, who also was Dana's classmate. Now, a human resource manager, and Richard, a school teacher, were part of a group of Dana's friends, hanging out and hiking many miles together. Valerie remembers that Dana simply loved life. She loved the outdoors, hiking, biking. She just liked the challenge. She was a tomboy until they went to their senior prom. Valerie never saw Dana in a dress before. That night, she wore makeup and had her hair done up. She almost didn't recognize her. Dana's death made Valerie and Richard reevaluate their lives. They took off, traveling around the world for almost 3 years. A lot of their decisions about their life were based on how Dana lived her life. If the weather was nice, Valerie would think what Dana would be doing, and she would just get out there and enjoy the beautiful day. When she's down or struggles to get to work, she thinks to herself, live your life like every day is your last, because you never know. The summer before Dana died, as she was preparing to move to the islands, the two women discussed their futures. Dana knew that she wanted to go to Hawaii. She'd been talking about it all her life, but it was hard for her to leave her mom. She had some second thoughts, but she wanted to do it for so long. When Valerie remembers her friend, she pictures her on top of a mountain called Old Rag near the Shenandoah Valley, where they often hiked. She's sitting in the sun on a rock, enjoying being alive and healthy. Dana wasn't vain about her beauty. She was childlike and shy. There were always 3 or 4 men who were in love with her, but she just wanted friendships. She wasn't ready for the serious stuff. When Sandra, her sister, introduced Mark Evans to Dana, he was pleasantly surprised. He had known Sandra for a long time. He actually always had a crush on Sandra, but Sandra had Jim. Then he meets Dana, who is the spitting image of her sister Sandy. Mark is like, thank you Lord, there are 2 of them. Mark, a carpenter, surfer, and father of 2 little girls, was the friend Dana biked over to invite to dinner that Christmas Eve afternoon. He has lived on the Big Island for 12 years. The house in Opihikao, which he now shares with his daughters and his partner, he actually built the house himself. As their friendship grew, Mark realized that Dana was different. She was really innocent, pure. She didn't know anything about anything. It wasn't like, let's just start a relationship and make love. It was the way a relationship should start. Dana and Mark spent time bodyboarding, swimming, surfing, and just hanging out. One day he took her to Waipio Valley. They took a hike back to the waterfalls. Dana was strong but so graceful. She was just like an angel. After Dana died, he also reassessed his values. The way that he lives his life. His house has no doors and there are walls on only 2 sides. He lives an open lifestyle and still everything is good. His kids walk to the mailbox around the corner from the house. He says he can't live in fear. Something like that might never happen again. Then it might happen tomorrow. He says he might drown while surfing or a shark could attack him. But this is his life. Dana's death left Mark feeling incomplete. Quote, she was a great person. It goes over and over in my mind. Where would my life be? There is no telling if Dana and I would have worked out, but I wonder. We were really good together. We kissed only 1 time. Yeah, I loved her. End of quote. Dana loved to run, to bike and hike, to skate and swim. When Dana left Mark's house that afternoon, he suggested that he drive her back, but she told him it was a beautiful day and got on her bike. She pedaled away along the coastal road, smiling, tanned, lovely, alive. Dana lives on though, beautiful, shy and kind, in the memories of those who knew her. And to end the video, I'm just so sad that they never actually found out who unknown male number 1 is. They didn't find Dana's killer. They, I think, messed it up really, really badly. The investigators were just so focused on just closing the case and bringing charges on someone for Dana's murder that they were willing to just ignore evidence. And quite frankly, the obvious, if those people are inconsistent in their stories and they keep coming forward because the others got deals, it's not rocket science that they would take advantage and lie. And I have to tell you that as much as I want to believe that, you know, police officers or investigators, when doing their investigations, are unbiased, I'm kind of more inclined to say that to some degree they are biased. No one has evidence which 100% proves that someone is guilty, and most of the time you go off on circumstantial evidence and your gut, really, right? And then the rest kind of follows, it falls into place, or it should anyway. But once you are biased as an investigator, you can't just look at the case objectively. And once you have a suspect and you have your first impression of the person, you kind of made your decision about the person already. And I feel like in Dana's case, the investigators, they just wanted to get someone charged for the murder. They ignored evidence which would lead them elsewhere, and they made other evidence work with their theory rather than following the evidence and seeing where the evidence leads them. They just gave deals on top of deals to people already in prison, when you have to objectively ask yourself, what are these people looking to gain? And when it's obvious to you as well as an investigator that, you know, hold on a minute, the stories don't match, there are inconsistencies here. You are looking for a truck, the beetle was bought after Dana died, one of the people coming forward couldn't even identify Frank in court, the t-shirt was the wrong size. Why do you push on the same theory? And the prosecutor, he did the same thing. To me, it just seems like they all just wanted to get someone on these charges and close the case and, you know, just move on with their jobs. For them, from my point of view, it didn't quite matter that the person they are sending in prison is not actually guilty of the murder, but rather that they have someone to pin the murder on, if you get what I mean. Anyway, please let me know what do you guys think in the comment section down below. For now, thank you so much for watching. Take care, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!